We are at 5 after, and we have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Not a whole lot on the housekeeping end of things, just wanted to let you all know today we had planned on making this open hour be a testing clinic, and we had planned on doing a PR merge jam this week. We've put both of those things kind of on hold to focus on the CVE, the messaging, and kind of supporting and following up with people on the CVE. So we will be talking about the CVE here in a little bit. But we want to get through a couple other things first. So that's about it for updates. We do still have the Twitch streams going on. We have meetups happening every week now. The events are all on the Community Salt Stack page, so keep an eye there. That's going to be your source of news. On a semi-related note, we've started doing this kind of feedback item of the week that it seems like every week there's a common question or request that a lot of people have, and this week is something that until the past week I hadn't even heard anybody request, but recently we've had several people request that we make a security specific email list that doesn't contain any marketing data, that just only comes out when there's a major update like we have now, and then that we create an RSS feed for all of our information. Those requests have been heard, and we are in the process of looking into how to make those things happen. For the RSS feed, I think we need to contact the company that kind of hosts and runs the community website. So as we get those things figured out and hopefully implemented, I'll be sure to share that with everybody. And then I'm not sure if it makes sense, Mo, maybe you could answer this. Does it make sense for us to talk about the CVE release first and then have Ty talk about his POCs and API utility, or do you want to do it the other way around?
No, I think it's, first, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Absolutely, we should just go ahead and do a summary on the CVE itself, and then very excited and grateful that Ty has also joined us, because I think there's been some requests for some more questions and a dialogue around the work that's been going on around the exploitations and the like. So again, I'm grateful and thank you, Ty, for coming in as a guest speaker for us. So let's start off with a CVE summary, and then we'll take a sort of a moment to take questions in case folks have any. And then you know, we'll transition, as you said, Cassandra. So May 7th update. This is where we're at for those who are on the call and those who are listening to the recording or reading, you know, the minutes from this particular session afterwards. The first thing I'll start off by saying is by this time, we've seen an incredible amount of collaboration across the community, folks who are lending questions, asking questions, and folks who are lending their expertise to answer and help folks through the process of responding to the CVE, applying patches, or doing upgrades. So my first update coming into this week is just a heartfelt thank you. We've just been overwhelmed by how the community has rallied together to try and make sure that we address those questions and be there for each other as we go through that. The second update is by now everybody should have seen the blogs that we have posted. Patches have been made available for all versions, all known versions that have an impact as a result of the CVE. So patches are available for versions 2015 all the way through 2018, which are of course out of support. And then of course the packages themselves, the RPMs, have been available for 2019 and 3000. So at this point in time, anybody that has not applied the patches or upgraded, please go ahead and make sure that you are doing so. Incredibly, there's actually a still good portion of people out there that have not. You know, we're tracking, of course, the statistics with F-Secure and others relative to how many people have been downloading those patches, how many people are applying. You know, we assume they downloaded and therefore applied. We're tracking that, and the numbers that we have indicate that there's still, you know, a good sizable chunk of people out there that have not yet applied those patches. So we're going to continue to create drumbeat of news and updates to make sure that folks understand that anything and everything they need relative to actually addressing the CVE from a patch and or a package perspective is available and out there. The second thing is we've sent out a blog clarification. There has been some discussion as to whether you know, the patches that have been released did address the issue, and what's the delta on the follow-on patches. So let me just start by clarifying. When we refer to the word patch, we mean a patch that's applicable to all the unsupported versions, 2018 and below, because we obviously are not packaging those and creating RPMs. And when we refer to an RPM or a package, we're referring, of course, to the fully supported, downloadable from the repo for 2019 and 3000. When I refer to the original and later on, there has been two patch waves. Wave number one was released on April 29th, late at night, or for our European colleagues, it would have appeared on April 30th. All of those patches that have been released address the CVE. They have all you need to actually address the CVE. So for anybody that picked up the patches that were released on April 29th/30th and apply them, we've actually removed the remote execution threat and we addressed the CVE needs. As the week went by, for those patches, we discovered that there were two additional issues that we wanted to fix. Those issues are functional regressions. They cause the master to throw exceptions and errors. They do not cause a security threat or a vulnerability. They're just simply causing exceptions and errors in the master. We got a lot of feedback from the community that said, hey guys, it would be great if the patches, when we apply them, they do not cause that. And subsequently, we issued an alert out to the community saying, folks, if you have applied the patch, we're asking you to apply an additional patch. That additional patch removes these master errors and exceptions, but they do not, you do not need to be worried. You don't need to be alarmed. It's not something that's actually going to cause you to have been exposed. So I'm going to take a pause and a breath in here and acknowledge that it is a little bit complicated, all of the stuff that's going on. Because when we issued the note, we did say, and oh, by the way, it just happens to be that this exception and error in the master only happens to occur in versions 2017 and earlier. So we had to tell people, if you're on 2018, you're all good. You have nothing else to do. If you're on 2017 and earlier, do apply this additional patch, please, so that you do not get these master errors. The good news is, for anybody who's 2018 and earlier, if you have applied the patches, you did secure yourself against the CVEs. So the next question we got was, well, what about 2019 and 3000? So for 2019 and 3000, we are going to proceed and update those packages. And we're going to make those new updated, these new packages available this coming Wednesday. So next Wednesday, we're going to be releasing 3000.3 and 2019.2.5. Why are we doing that? Is there any concern? Is there additional security threats and so on? The answer is no. The reason we're updating it is because we've identified two issues. Those two issues essentially also introduced functional regressions. They are issues 57027 and issue 57016. And I'm going to go ahead and paste the links to those in the chat of our Zoom in here. And of course, the minutes will have links to those. Those issues were identified early on as also some functional regressions. And frankly, they are minor, but again, they warranted based on a large community feedback for us to address them. One of them, for example, causes newer masters to not communicate with older minions. We felt initially that that was an isolated instance, but then we learned actually that that's more prevalent than we had assumed. So as a result of that, we took the action to not wait for sodium, but rather to address issues 57027 and issues 57016 by releasing these new RPM packages on Wednesday. So then that leads us to the final flow of this communication question, which is, hang on a second. So is issue 57027 and issue 57016 addressed for those of us who are on 2018 and earlier? The answer is yes. The good news is the patches that you have that were released on April 29th and 30th do have those two issues fixed. It's just that we didn't do it for 2019 and 3000 because, as you can imagine, producing a whole RPM is very different than producing a patch. You know, we go through all of the cycles of testing, we go all of the platforms, et cetera, and we go through that process, which is why we've staged it for next Wednesday. So let me pause here for a moment and just make sure that if there are any questions from those on the phone or those listening and want to maybe posting their questions through DM or through the Slack or through the Zoom chat, to ask questions about those, please, so that we can address them before I complete the CVE update. Okay, there is just one question. I'll repeat it, that came through a DM. The question is, so to confirm, if you are on 2018, you do not need to apply any additional packages. The answer is correct. If you are on 2018, you do not need to apply additional packages. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I post in here as well the written word to everything that I'm actually speaking to, because I know sometimes hearing all of that versus reading it may be difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I share the link here as well. Okay, so then the next part of the CVE update is to do with what has happened around Docker. So there's been quite a few questions raised around whether we've updated the Docker images. I can confirm that the Docker images have been updated. I can also confirm that next Wednesday, when we release 3000.3 as well as 2019.2.5, we will also be refreshing these Docker images. So expect next Wednesday, if you're a user of these images, that we will be able to actually get those updated. The next item on the CVE to get everybody updated is there's been a great deal of questions raised around, can we please refresh the hardening salt deployments guidelines and include within it some additional information that pertain and talk to these security best practices? Because one of the things that we've learned is that we had actually a good number of community members come back to us and say, you know what, I did not know that I should not be having my salt master on an open port to the internet. I just want to acknowledge that nobody should consider the statement as, oh my God, how can you not know that? Or, oh my God, of course everybody knows that. We don't take any of these things for granted. We think the request is very legitimate, and we think that it is important for us as a community to make sure that we amplify the message of how do you secure your deployments. So we have an action going on at the moment to update a document that we have out there that is both talking about hardening your salt deployments as well as being able to talk about the best practices for security, including things, for example, how you rotate your keys, etc. Please expect that that document will be published out on Monday, and we will give people links to that document. So it will be hosted on community.saltstack.com, which should become a new go-to place for everybody. That's where we blog. That's where we tell you how to join our mailing lists, our Slack, our Google, IRC, etc. All of that is on that community.saltstack.com. So we will be publishing that document there. As and when we publish it, we will be publicizing on Slack and other channels. So an apology ahead of time for those of you who are offended by the abuse of the @channel or @here. We will be doing that one more time just because a lot of people have said, hey guys, when something important happens, let us know. And just given a lot of people asking for this document, we feel that's important enough and should not be missed. Which brings me to my last topic, which is around communications. We've learned a lot as a community. I use this word with all sincerity. Every single one of the Salt Core team is just really heartfelt, sincere thanks and gratitude for what the community is sharing with us around best practices and feedback. Hey guys, let's create, this type of a mailing list, or so on and so forth. So we're taking all of that on board, and in the communication, you'll see that some of the actions will be taken. We will update the community closer to when we've actioned those items, and we'll sort of reestablish what is the communication plan and protocol for us as a community, so that everybody knows, hey, if you get one of those on announcement, you better pay attention. You know, surprising to me, to be honest, is that when we've issued the alert, 6 days ahead of when we publish the patches, and we said this is a CVSS 10, we still had a lot of people going, you didn't alert me enough that this was, something I should pay attention to. That's a lesson learned for us. Those in security understand what a CVSS number 10. It's basically there's a fire, it's in the building, and run, drop everything and run. And of course, that's actually not how everybody interpreted. So again, we're taking that as a lesson learned, and we're making sure that we improve our communications as such. So what else did the community raise? Well, as a matter of intro for what Ty would speak to next, the next topic that is definitely still active, a lot on top of mind for people, is the topic of POCs. I cannot tell you how many emails, Slack messages. I woke up at one morning with 71 DMs on my Slack about people expressing frustration with the POCs, and the fact that many people were essentially publishing on Twitter or on their own repos some POCs that essentially are propagating what we would consider common or expert knowledge around how you would exploit this particular vulnerability. As I expressed in the blog, we've been in touch with a lot of those folks. We've been asking them to create and/or generate a grace period to allow people to patch and have the time. The security community, if you talk to some industry leaders like IBM X-Force and so on, are split on this. The common ethical practice is, frankly, to allow people the time and or find a way to create a utility, as Ty did, that allows people to know that they're not exploited without necessarily disclosing all of the knowledge. Believe it or not, many hackers out there, we may think of them as sophisticated, but the reality is that they're not necessarily so. And making it much easier for them to exploit just frankly makes it all that easier again for people to take advantage of this. So again, this is a lesson learned for us. We're going to be partnering with more experts such as F-Secure and others in the period of blackout, where we've sort of alerted people of an upcoming CVE, but we had not published the details of it, to be able to actually create some of these utilities and find a way. Can we control it? Unfortunately, we cannot. We can ask, we can work, we can find ways to mitigate, but we cannot control it. So that's exactly why we are ever so grateful for the great work that a number of the community members have put into the Salt Store minor channel, and sharing that knowledge and getting people up there. So with that, let me pause for a moment and see if there are any questions that came up, and then after that, I'll hand it over to Ty to talk us through a couple of questions that have come up. And Ty, just to give you a heads up around the sequence of what people have been asking. Number one is they've been asking, can you please elaborate as to the progression of exploits that you've seen? Not all sysadmins are necessarily well-versed into, frankly, the security threats or the language or the lingo. So please describe with some reference to SALT terminology what these exploits are. The second question that has been coming on mind is, can you please describe the API tool, and how can you assure people that by using it, they're not exposing or compromising themselves? There's a lot of concern out there from people as to, am I using something that's certified kosher or not? But let's take a pause before we let Ty speak and see what questions or comments are out there. So one comment that's come in, it says, what about SALT, breaking on Ubuntu 20.04, waiting until July is not acceptable. So at the moment, and I think that we've we've addressed this as also a lesson learned item. We're going to be improving our what is supported and what is not, matrix that is out there. We've upfront said, Ubuntu 20 was not one of the supported areas. We're working towards, of course, making it supported. And as such, as Curl has sort of described in here, I do see an answer that, when we've supported, we'll go ahead and fix it. But I will take this, Vernon, back to the team and see if there's something we can do to accelerate.
Most of the patching, if not all of it, that needs to be done in order to get it to work has already been merged into master. So
that's great. Thank you, Erik. Appreciate you clarifying that. Mike, I think you had another one. Site and in the docs, yes, this is a new, as only the last 2 weeks. Yep, I appreciate you opening the issue and adding that to the docs. Thank you for that, Mike. So we're going to connect community.saltstack.com to the documentation, and that's the issue. Okay, any other questions, team? Any comments before we hand it to Ty?
I don't see anything in chat or in Twitch chat. I'm monitoring both of those.
Okay, so maybe just as we're wrapping up the updates, let me just wrap it up with one more thing. If you haven't heard it enough, let me say it one more time. Just an incredible thank you. Ty is an example, Erik, Mike Place, Orange Dog, M. Smith, an incredible amount of people, Jay, everybody. You guys have been just phenomenally incredible in coming together and supporting each other as a community. And Mike, we continue to monitor the checklist, and I believe that we're very close to closing that off. So just a heartfelt thank you. Ty, the floor is yours, brother. Thank you again for joining us, and as maybe you can talk us through the 2 questions that I shared with you.
Yeah, sure. Is my audio working fine?
Yes, very well.
Perfect, thanks. All right. Yeah, so I mean, I don't have a whole lot to just say in terms of what information that I would like to make public. I've been updating saltexploit.com pretty frequently with my thoughts there, but in terms of answering some of the questions that have come up in terms of what kind of exploits or what kind of malware have we been seeing abuse the exploits, and how does the API work? I mean, so we have no guarantee. We can't guarantee that the first person to use this exploit was the mining application. So if you go back to the beginning of the initial GitHub thread, there's a thread started reporting a malicious binary taking up 100% CPU cycles called salt minions with an S. And it's very obvious that it's intentionally named to confuse users that are not, paying utmost attention to their systems. And that thing was just a sledgehammer, right? It's looking for every single process that's taking, more than 5% of your CPU and killing everything it possibly can just to make sure that crypto mining application can take as much power as it can to send off as many hashes to the mining pool. So we can't promise or confirm that was that attacker was the first one to abuse the exploits, these CVEs that were announced. That's the first one that I've seen. That's the first one that I've seen others report, and no one else has reported anything to me or on any of the channels that I'm monitoring that they believe they've seen an exploit occur before that time. So I've written it probably in 3 different places on saltexploit.com that I cannot promise you that this is the first attacker to use this exploit. It is the first one that I've caught. And I wasn't the first one to catch it, by the way, just full ownership of that. I found the GitHub issue about 10-15 minutes after it was initially created. However, the initial version of that payload was not actually all too malicious, considering how it ended up playing out in the end. The initial version, all it did, and we have the shell scripts that were used as the attack vector. So before I get there, the way the attacker used this exploit is he would grab the master's authentication key using the file traverser, I think, and he would run a remote command against all the minions, and that was a shell exec command. So it was running a bash script or plain shell script on your system that was deleting a bunch of files, killing a bunch of processes, and then downloading a payload and running it. So we actually have copies of that shell script, and we have copies of the payload it downloaded. And that initial payload was not salt minions, it was a binary called salt store. Salt store contains the salt minions binary and a way to update it. And it places it in temp and runs it. At least that was the first version. So in the initial attack, looking at the shell scripts, looking at, we found some people volunteered some Snoopy logs and some audit D logs. We have a pretty good idea, and we're pretty confident that we know exactly what that what we're calling the V1 attack was. And all that was required to mitigate and prevent it from coming back is, update your saltmaster or patch it depending on what version you're running. Restart it just to make sure that it's actually reloaded in memory and the new version is running. And then delete the 2 files. Now that doesn't revert your system back to how it was before, but it does prevent the attacker from getting another foot into your system at V1. There are plenty of other side effects. Those are all listed on the site. He was doing things like disabling app armor. He's disabling SE Linux. He's disabling every firewall he can possibly find, assuming you're not running BSD because they use a different set of firewalls. But overall, if you deleted 2 files and reboot and just update your saltmaster, you're basically good on V1. So we put a write-up together and basically described how it all happened and a list of steps to uninstall and remove it. So after that, at about 4 a.m. my time the next day, a second version was uploaded. Now, the reason I know the exact timestamps on when these files were uploaded is the initial vector for distributing this binary was Bitbucket, because it was kind of a dual-edged sword for the attacker. Bitbucket is whitelisted by a lot of minions, which is probably why he used it. But it also gave me and a couple others the ability to subscribe to the repo and watch it, so we could actually get emails every time that he updated a new version of the payload. Every time he pushed a binary, he force pushed it to cover his tracks from the previous versions. So we actually don't have a copy of one of the payloads, but we knew that it existed for a window of time. But anyway, as things go on and we continue to post, okay, here's how you remove version 2, here's how you remove version 3, here's how you remove version 4. Version 4 ended up actually getting very tricky to remove. There were a lot of persistence mechanisms. The binary would just keep coming back. And eventually, when version 5 came out, the advice changed completely. It was actually somewhere in between version 4 and version 5 where the advice changed from here's how you can mitigate and remove the binary, and then you can probably keep your systems up for a couple of weeks as you transfer data over to new systems, to, I'm sorry, back up your config files, find out what was stolen, you have to delete everything now. Because in between versions 4 and 5, we believe an additional attacker became involved, quite possibly by abusing some POCs that were posted in the wild. And he started installing worms. And a worm is, and the term is, it's kind of like a virus that's automatic. It will pull in automatically all of the private keys that it can find on your system, and then do a network scan and try to log into any other machine it has visibility into. So it's self-replicating, just like like an actual virus versus just plain old malware. So somewhere in between version 4 and version 5, the shell scripts that's used to install Salt Store also began to install this worm. So that's a big problem, right? Because now you've got something that's self-replicating. Even if you fixed your salt master, you clean 5 machines, by the time you get to the 6th, it's made its way back to the 1st. And keep in mind, some people were saying, well, I added firewalls back. Well, this script is disabling all of your host firewalls. So if you didn't use access controller or some kind of hosting provider based firewall that your system can't turn off from inside, it's not really doing much for you. So current advice on this system, if you realize that you've been compromised, there's a few things you need to do. One, you're going to have to admit you got to take some losses. The patch has been available for a while now. I know there were people are saying there's some problems with the initial publicity on this patch, but at this point, you know, there's a Forbes article about it. There's so many different places that have publicized, look, you need to update that. I mean, I don't want to say it's your fault, but there comes a certain point where it becomes irresponsible. You need to be updating your system and watching for these things. And I do totally understand there are some sysadmins that have been grandfathered into an environment that has been already set up, and it's possible they don't even know they're running SaltStack, but you need to update your systems. That's all I can really say. So with this latest version, the steps you got to take are, you got to just shut down your SaltMaster, take a backup of it first, snapshot it for forensic sake, shut it down. Don't even bother updating it or patching it. Set up a new one. Set up a new SaltMaster. Make sure that it's updated to the latest. Some distros don't actually have the latest version of SaltStack available yet. I saw Debian recently push the patch, so they're good now. I know that some Fedora users were having problems, but basically you just need to make sure that you're no longer vulnerable to these CVEs. And there are 2 or 3 tools that are available now that I can recommend for doing that. One of which is my own, one of which is provided by SaltStack, and one of which is another by another community user. So after you verify that your master is no longer vulnerable, you can probably reattach it, your minions to the master, because the minions can't log into the master. I would not recommend doing that. It might make things easier in terms of shutting things down. But just know that if you reattach compromised minions to a compromised master, you're probably going to have to make a third master as well. You're going to need to spin up all your minions all over again. When you backed up, you need to back up all your config files and scan them. Make sure that you don't accidentally reintroduce the malware into your new systems. After you get your new minions set up to replace the old ones, I'd recommend that you do some forensics and find out what was on these systems. Find out what was stolen. At this point, if it was on the box, it was taken. And I know that a lot of people roll their eyes at that statement, because a lot of security nuts say that all the time. If it was on the box, it is taken. If someone got in your box, you're owned. I have actually seen this play out. I see entire home folders being zipped up, opt folders, custom binaries, SSH keys, environment variables. There are scripts running right now in the wild on unsecured systems that are stealing all of that. And I've seen hundreds of systems being affected by this. So it's very, very important. If it's on your machine, consider it stolen. Change your API keys. You might have to notify your user base that it's possible they've been compromised. I don't know. That's going to be up to you. Please do the right thing. As far as that goes, I don't know. Is there any other questions on the malware breakdown or anything like that? I'll take a break here. All right.
Hey, Ty, I had a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Is there, I don't know if it's in the Salt exploit site, but is there an easy way to determine which version of the attack a particular, like a master, suffered from?
Right. Yeah. So originally, yes, and no longer. So I'll get into why that is. So yeah, and I'll answer your question at the same time as Ralph's, because that's an interesting. They are kind of somewhat similar. So all the information on how to tell if you had V1, V2, etc., is on Ralph Ray. Sorry, I'm reading at the same time. Is on Salt Exploit. But here's the new problem. A lot of people have started joining the Slack channel, and a lot of people have started joining started watching Salt Exploit. And I am certain at this point that there are malicious attackers following these two things. And if you caught that's why I'm posting timestamps. If you caught it by this time, then you can follow these steps. I did provide MD5 sums of the initial salt store payloads that are used to set everything up, and you can probably look at those and MD5 them and find out what payload version you have. But here's the problem with that now. Those MD5 sums and those the payloads themselves are not public. I've done my very best to prevent people from disseminating those, but you can still get a hold of one if you know how to do it. By following the shell scripts and setting up a honeypot yourself, you can definitely pull down the payload if you're determined enough. So here's the problem with that. If I promise you, look, here's your MD5 sum of your salt store binary, it matches V1. Congratulations. All you have to do is delete 2 files and reboot, and then you have to go set up your firewalls again. I've now been dishonest with you, because it's very possible that an attacker intentionally installed V1 and then ran his shell scripts alongside V1, and now you have a false sense of security. So I'm no longer recommending that. Even if you have an MD5 sum of V1 on your system, don't keep that system. It's too late. I'm sorry. There's a large window of time, probably up until 4 a.m. the next day, where if you just had V1, you had V1. That's no longer the case. Let me see if there's any. I think there's another question. Okay, that's nothing I can answer. I think I'll hand it over.
A quick follow-up question to that, Ty, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So if for saltmasters who are being infected by, say, like V1, V2, were people seeing them being, if they were not remediating them, were those saltmasters being bumped up to like the subsequent attack versions, like up to V5?
Yeah. So here's the thing is, actually, just not to be too picky, but the saltmasters actually were not targeted in the initial attacks. Specifically, the minions were targeted, unless, and there's a caveat, unless the master is also a minion listening to itself. The target was asterisk, so it was just hitting everything it possibly could, right? Yes, absolutely. The payloads had an auto update functionality. They would constantly check their the wrath that was used was NSPPS, I think, and it's also used in H2 miner. So the payload itself auto updated itself if you did not remove it before the next one was released. And we saw evidence to suggest it updated itself, or at least checked for updates, even as often as every 2 minutes. So it was very aggressive. Yeah.
So Ty, thank you. I'm going to let you take a break and catch your breath, and I'll answer the 2 questions from Erik. And then we'll continue into your API utility, please, just to give you that. So on the first question around were the upstream distros notified, the answer to that is yes. So for example, we worked with SUSE, we did some of their tests and so on. Same with Debian and others. I think for some of them, it took them a little bit longer, but we did give them notice and we worked with them. On question number 2 on the email on Monday, I would like you to I will share this publicly. I don't think there's an issue in that, to say that we actually did use it. We did use the email out. And then when we went back and heard that people did not receive the email, we discovered that 99.9% of the people had clicked the thing that says, please do not contact me, and they opted out. So the automated email server actually did not, of course, send any emails as a result of that. So what we did is we consulted with legal afterwards, and we decided that if what we are sending is critical security information, could we bypass that for the one time? And we got the green light from legal to proceed, and that's why you got the email, Erik, on the Monday. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. So as a result of this, one of the things we didn't explicitly talk about, but you will hear from us, is in addition to the RSS feed, we are creating an email list that is exclusively designed to just talk about any types of engineering/security issues, marketing or sales. I know that there is a broad distrust, in the broader industry in signing up for anything, and that people think that people will abuse it. I hope at SaltStack we've illustrated time and again that we hold a very high standard in making sure that we do not do that. So wherever we've published anything, the form to get access to the patch, the form to actually get the scripts to run your own behind the firewall checks and so on, we've always put the footnote that says this is not going to be used. It's actually not maintained by sales. It's not connected through marketing. This is just directly making sure that we reach out to the audience. We did receive some feedback that says, hey, maybe you can put that in a red or a neon color box, please, so that we can see it. And we will take that feedback and do so. But at this stage, please do not worry about being contacted through sales or marketing. That's not the intent. Please go ahead, get your patches if you haven't, as Ty said, and as we've all been saying, get the system patched. Mike, I will look into this. Appreciate you letting me know. I do not know. Can you forward me the email? I would appreciate it. And then I'll make sure that we separate those two. Thank you. Yeah, we'll investigate it. Thank you. So Ty, over back to you.
Yeah, sure. So would you mind repeating the specific questions on what people are asking on the API? I know a couple of them, but just to make sure I answer all of them.
Yeah, the general theme of the question was about, can you describe the API service and what if somebody utilizes it, what should they expect back as an answer, and what is it checking for? And then there is a little bit of a subtone that goes with people's trust and distrust, which is what can we do to assure people that, the information or the data or so on is not landing in some, in the wrong hands or for wrong purposes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to address that, so I'll tell you what you can expect from your side if you were to run the API. If you run the API, a new file is created in your temp folder called hacked.txt, all caps on hacked, and it just points you to the GitHub issue. I had written this before the Slack channel was like really a thing, so I didn't point it there, and I didn't point it to my own site because that wasn't up yet either. The API was before the blog, so and I have not gone back to update it. Yeah, so I mean that's all you can really expect on your end. So here's the thing, you can't trust me when it comes to that. And as a SecOps person, you really cannot trust me. You cannot use this API and trust me. That being said, I built it and I'm providing it anyway. I did so with a couple of caveats. I linked back to the part in the GitHub issue where I first announced it. There are other people saying that's a terrible idea. Don't use this. Your IP address is being sent to some random stranger on the internet. I hope you really trust him if you're sending it to him. And they're all right. That is all 100% valid criticism. You have no reason to trust me. I don't know if anyone here has even heard of me before this weekend. Here's the thing though. I was struggling to know what I could do to help. So I looked at, I'm not going to describe exactly how I figured out how to exploit the POC. I'd rather not because I don't want to give anyone else any ideas. But I kind of looked at the situation and said, okay, here's a problem. A lot of people are going to be hearing this news and they're not going to be that interested in it until it actually affects them, or they can see that it's affected them rather. And they're probably not even going to bother to check. They might run saltmaster -- version or something, but maybe that's not enough because the old version of the binary is still in memory, and that's executing a new version. How can I make it so that it's easy for people to check to see if they're vulnerable? So I considered writing and publishing a POC that you can run locally to see whether or not you are vulnerable. And the problem with that I could see was it would be super easy to weaponize. It would be child's play to remove the code that creates the text file or even just checks to see if it can reach the key or whatever it ends up doing, and replace it with something really nasty, and then take that code and put it into a loop that scans across public IPs and just launches against everybody. And now I've just created a second botnet, right? So I posted this a couple of times on the page. I'm a huge fan of open source. I love keeping things open. I love not requiring trust from users. All the platforms I use, Signal user, everything that I do, I try to go open source if I can, and I try to contribute when I can. I saw actual evidence that POCs that were out in the wild were being weaponized and used against people that didn't even know anything was happening. So in this particular case, I decided it was probably best to not distribute my source code. I did, however, I shared it with 2 other people that were very active in the chat. Justin, I won't give his last name, and John, I also won't give his last name. And the 2 of them did do a peer review / audit, if you will, on the code before I sent it out live. Now, even with that, there's no guarantee to them that I actually deployed the code that I showed them. You cannot trust me. You can't from a security perspective. So again, why did I do this? If I keep saying like you can't trust it, why did I do it? When I set this up for my own system, I was going to run something that was local, and I ran into a ton of issues. So for example, I run Arch Linux, and that means my default Python environment is 3.8. SaltStack does not play very nicely with 3.8 at the present moment. And so importing Salt and using it to run the POC generates a lot of errors, and they're not errors that are easy to fix. So I knew that whatever I ended up distributing would have to be something that would be easy and quick to use. So the idea of a web API came up, which is, maybe you can just curl to this and it will tell you whether or not your machine is affected. But then that also becomes a problem because, and I've seen other companies actually release tools that do this. I know I roasted AppCheck on Twitter. They released a proof of concept tool that it seemed very malicious in intent because they're bragging that you can run as many checks in parallel as you want to see if a system is infected. And as far as I know, not many people run, 10,000 salt masters. They have 10,000 minions and maybe some syndics and a couple masters in parallel, maybe a dozen masters in parallel, but you're not running thousands of masters in parallel. So why would you do that? Why would you build that functionality into your script? I didn't want anything like that to be available as part of mine. I wanted to make sure that if there was any risk in publishing my API, it was going to be as small as possible. So what I ended up doing is instead of reporting back when you curl to the API, whether or not the system is infected whether or not the system is vulnerable or not, it actually gives you the same answer back no matter what. It creates a random delay timeout, so you can't tell whether or not I actually did anything or not. And then it just writes a file on the system and tells you to check for it. So the idea behind that is you will not actually be able to know whether or not the system is vulnerable to the hack unless you already have access to that server and you can go and check for that file. So that was the solution that I ended up at. And I created it in /temp. So even if someone abuses my service and runs it against the WAN, it's a small text file. It's literally 1 sentence and it's in temp, so it'll be gone on reboot. So I know there are ways that people can still abuse it, and they can run it against sites that they don't actually have the authority to check or create files on. But I absolutely did my best in terms of that. I also included rate limiting. There was a Twitter troll that was trying to teach me a lesson. And I thought it was quite funny because he thought he'd taken my service down, and I mocked him a little bit, saying, "Look, I mean, I'm glad you think you're doing something, but you just triggered my rate limiting. That's all you did." So yeah, I mean, in terms of data security, I'm not logging any of this. And again, I cannot prove that to you. I absolutely cannot prove that to you. If you don't want to trust me, use one of the offline checkers or use the SaltStack official checker. I have this in place to be helpful, and I even recommend that you don't use it. That being said, all of you people who have used it, don't freak out. I Scout's honor, Eagle Scout, Scout's honor. I actually flush my log entries. I did it this morning, and I'll do it again very soon. I'm talking about syslog, varlog, journal, all that stuff, just for any IP connections. Additionally, Salt Exploit and the tool on Salt Exploit are hosted on the same host. So even if I were to try to determine it by incoming connection, I can't tell if you're just visiting the website or the API tool. And everything is containerized and set to restart itself fairly frequently. So actually, if you do curl it and get back a 503 error, it's possible either one, you've been abusing the service, or two, you just happen to catch it in the middle of a restart because I wanted to flush everything I possibly could. So I am not keeping any logs. I probably can't really prove that in any way, no way that I can think of, because even if I were to publish my source, publish my code, you can't prove that that's what I'm actually running. So again, I mean, I'm very happy to help. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of incoming traffic and some outgoing traffic from the server through my web host panel. Again, I'm using line node, so those of you who use that will know that I can't actually see who it is without long view and stack view installed. So I know it's being used, and I'm glad that it's helping people, but I have no clue who you are. And again, there's nothing I can do to prove that. So if that scares you, there are other tools available. I actually linked the other tools as well on my site to make sure that I wasn't pointing everyone towards, my thing just because it's mine. Yeah, so I don't know if there's any other questions. I know I cannot be very reassuring, and that's just the SecOps person to me. I'm sorry.
No, Ty, I think that's great, and I appreciate you saying that. And I think everybody would have expected you to put that sort of sentiment out there. And I do know that we've been contacted by a few people who for that very reason said, if something for any reason goes wrong or so on, they won't have a good grounding to stand on the fact that they use some sort of an unverified service, which is why we've been collaborating closely with you, and which is why also we've sent out as part of the communication an email that says there is a script, it's from SaltStack, so if you want to yell at anybody about verifying the patch and so on, yell at us. So for the folks listening to those, you have the option of using the API service as it has been used by many, with the caveats that Ty has highlighted time and again. And I have to tell you, it's been a saver for many people. So thank you for that, Ty.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate once again, this is on Salt Exploit. I have a disclaimer down at the bottom, but I am not officially affiliated with SaltStack in any way. So they cannot take any responsibility for anything I do, and in terms of how that goes. And I will be absolutely sure to publicize the SaltStack API. I can't remember if I've already updated Salt Exploit to include it or not. I know I at least retweeted it, but I will take a look at that. Let me see. Nope, I have not. So I will add that right after this call. So I do have the link to the offline checker made by the I don't want to butcher his name, but it's there. And I do have the web API. So I will add SaltStack's official one right after this call.
Thank you, Ty. I think I speak on behalf of everybody in the community to thank you, as Ralph, I guess, mentioned it. Heartfelt thank you to you and the colleagues who have been working closely with you, and you've accredited quite honorably in your site. So thank you for that. I know a lot of people are just in sincere gratitude for the work that you've put into this. I know. Thank you. I know we have only a few minutes left, so let me just make sure I open it up for the rest of the community who are on the phone, and maybe any questions through DM that are coming in. Anything else on anybody's mind? And I will say that Rob Beglinger does have the absolutely best photo for his Zoom.
I just noticed that.
So kudos for that, Rob.
Well, thank you.
All right. Any questions?
Hey, and sorry, I just would like to rebut what I don't know who agent user is, but saying it's a trivial 4 lines of PyZMQ to exploit hiding details about it is meaningless. We have seen direct evidence that is not true. And to reiterate what Moe said earlier, many of these hackers that are using this exploit, given what they're using to hack affected machines, it's pretty obvious that several of them are script kiddies. They've never done this before. They're just doing it because they can. So I would say the more that you publish and put out there, the easier it is going to be for them, and the more affected the people that still haven't patched are going to be. So I totally agree that openness is usually the play. Again, huge fan of open source, and it does on a certain level pain me to say, please don't post it. Just please don't.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder, Ty. Thank you. Any other questions, team? Justin, so you're noting here, again, the same heartfelt gratitude. I know just incredible amount of work here by the team, so thank you. All right, any other questions? Going once, twice? We'll hold here for 10 seconds and see if anything else comes up. For those who are joining the call new, you'll find that we always have about 20 seconds of silence before something gets posted. So we'll give that time here.
Yeah, and if the conversation needs to continue beyond the hour, that's certainly something that we can do. Okay, I see a request for the minutes. The minutes will be posted on the SaltStack wiki. My plan is to get those up today, this afternoon, and then the videos get posted on YouTube, and those go live either Friday afternoon or Saturday, kind of around lunchtime. There's a lag between uploading, editing, and actual publication. Speaking of I'm kind of the camp of, I find the very stressful because it's another input, right? It's another notification you have to respond to. But if you're not, join the announcements channel on Slack. That's where all of the announcements are posted, and then we kind of selectively cross-post them in other channels. For the IRC and Google Group users, any announcement that's posted on Slack is now being posted on IRC. Though on IRC, we've post a shorter version because IRC doesn't allow for formatting and such. And then on the Google Group as well, the SALT announced Google Group. So those are your sources of information. Yes, and Twitch. Oh, Mo, do we have a change on the date of sodium?
So thank you again. That's a very good question. At this point in time, we are not changing the date on sodium. We're actually having a planning session tomorrow to look at the outstanding issues that we have, and commitments on the board. If you'll notice, team, we've had internal milestones that we've publicized. Sage, if you do not mind, maybe pasting the link here onto the chat for folks who might not be aware of that wiki page. You'll find that we've described when are we going to do the code feature freeze, when is it that we will get into testing and fixing issues, when will we do a release candidate available. What you may observe is that we may be shifting those internal milestones a little bit. We have a buffer built into them. Like, it was very clear that we have a long window between the release candidate and the actual GA, and the purposes of that was to actually build a little bit of that in. So we will look at the plan, and we will be updating that particular page that we are going to link in here. And just want to make sure that I'm actually trying, I think I do not know if Sage, if you have the link to it, please. Yeah. So if there it is, it's been pasted. So if you look in there, as I said, you'll find these milestones. So if we change that, we will publicize it, but we're still holding on to the GA release date. And I actually do see in here, there's another question that says, will there be a PR port? Yeah, so for those who may not be familiar with what we're describing in here, one of the things that we've been looking forward towards is there's several community members that sort of raised their hand and said, hey, can we all get together, get onto sort of some blocks of time and try and help the SALT core team process more of these PRs that we want to port into master. If you remember, we started with a backlog of 900. We've been able to compress that to, I think it's up to 350 or so. And so the idea was to try and even tackle more of those that have been prioritized through a board by Sage. The intent was to actually run that PR port jam or port party this week, but the CVE obviously, took precedent. It became, the favorite child of the week, quite understandably. So the plan is to still go ahead and once we do the planning tomorrow, to give an update as to whether we will be able to accommodate time for for the PR jam. So we're still planning on finding a form of it. We may be doing it asynchronously or so on. I know that Sage and Gareth are thinking through that. We actually ran jams internally and so on, so we're modeling it in a similar way. So that's why we're going to think through a little bit how to make this successful. If anybody and everybody wants to join in and help us with that, port party, that's amazing. There's also a list of priority issues out there that might get us into, the supporting newer version and so on. Sage has an amazing board that says what are the priorities based on the community. So you're always free to access that board, look at it, and grab one of those issues. Get the code, get the tests in, and we'll be happy to, of course, get it in there. Sage, Gareth, anything you want to add on that?
Nope, just echo that last sentiment. The more help we can get on getting those PRs down, the better. So, and thank you, a heartfelt thank you to all the community members who have helped out so far.
Why not have like a standing Zoom room for the code jam?
Yeah, that's one idea.
Doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going forward, it's still on the table. We're trying to think of some other things that we could do as well as manning a Zoom room all day, especially we know we have a lot of people that are in Europe and we want to make sure that they're heard and seen, and they have people that are available to them as well. So it may be tricky during this time. So just looking at also other options, but yes, that's one.
Yeah, there's a little bit of scheduling Tetris involved, but what we had initially envisioned was 3 kind of 8-hour blocks over the course of 3 days that would be dedicated support, and then, ad hoc through Slack or asynchronous support otherwise. So that had been the plan. We may move forward with that. We may change the shifts and when people are available to support. We will probably have at least part of the jam on Twitch as well.
Yeah, at least, but with Zoom, you do have to have the organizer has to be present, and if they leave, the meeting ends, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like I said, it was a scheduling Tetris is what I had to do when I was starting to plan the port jam.
Yeah, we can have one that's just open. We weren't sure if that was actually going to be useful if we didn't have somebody from someone either from the community scheduled to be, sort of there most of the time, and how to do that exactly so that we knew that it wasn't just open and sort of a free for all. With all that's been happening with Zoom, we thought that may not be the best idea.
Can the meeting order be handed off at all, or is it locked into what it was when it was created?
The Zoom meeting?
Yeah.
We can hand it off. There's definitely things we could do there, and it is an option. Yeah.
Okay. So I think let's be respectful of everybody's time. We're a little bit over here. Incredible. A reminder, these calls happen every week, team, at the same time. And we're always looking for anybody to use this as a platform. This is a community call. This is not a SaltStack call. So we don't never intend to just dominate the agenda. So if anybody wants to hop on and talk about a topic or so on, please make sure that you just communicate with Cassandra, and then we'll have that in there. We've had some great discussions, just about some standards and so on that other members have brought up. And just to close us off, perhaps with I guess the last comment that came in here. So yes, we are definitely making sure that we don't lose sight of the sport work, Ralph. So we'll do that. And yes, that's part of the planning session for tomorrow. If we determine that there are some issues that are more important than, some items to port, the board will have all of that. Sage's board will be the source of the truth as to what we want to prioritize. All right, with that, team, again, thank you so much. Ty, thank you to you and Justin and the team for incredible work and coming and taking the time to share all of that knowledge and answering the questions. For all of the folks who joined in here, every single one of you have made a difference for all of us, and we gratefully we're very grateful and thankful for all that you've done. Erik, Mike Place, everybody else, thank you so much. Thank you, team, and have a wonderful day, afternoon. Bye-bye.
Yep. A quick thing I'm going to add is that if you have topics you want to talk about in this meeting coming up, I dropped a link in the chat. You can DM them to me. It could be a pet project you're working on. Perhaps you want to do a talk for friends if you just have questions. Please send that my way, and then we can add it to a future open hour agenda. This is supposed to be a meeting that is helpful for all of you. Thanks again for all your contributions. Thanks for everything, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.